Hey everybody, welcome back to RotoCurve.com. I'm Josh Collacchi here to discuss Week 11 cash game picks and NFL on FanDuel. Of course, last week was one of those weeks where it was a little bit low scoring, but that usually helps because if there aren't a few guys that put up a ton of points, usually if you have a few guys that are in the mid-teens and the quarterback gets close to 20, you're going to be in cash, and that's luckily what happened last weekend for a lot of people. If you had guys like Derek Carr, if you had guys like Eric Decker, guys like that, all scored a bunch of points and able to get into your into the cash line for your cash lineup. So, with that being said, let's get right into Week 11. At quarterbacks, the guys I like this week, I'm not paying up for a Tom Brady. I'm not going to pay up for an Aaron Rodgers. The way that we're looking at quarterbacks is if you get a guy that's priced like that, you're going to need points of north of 25 to 27 just to get value. So I don't think I can pay up for the guys at those prices simply because you can get players at lesser prices that'll have similar production. Now, that means you're going to save some money to be able to spend at other positions. Now, that being said, that's exactly why I like Phillip Rivers this weekend with his quarterback for the San Diego Chargers at 8,200 against the Chiefs. Rivers has thrown at least one touchdown in all 9 games this season. He has at least 2 in 7 of the 9 games. And one thing about Rivers and why he's safe in cash is because, in addition to this consistency, the Chargers throw the ball over 43 times per game. That gives Rivers a safe floor to have a chance to throw for a bunch of yards and a bunch of touchdowns. There's no other quarterback that throws as often as Rivers this season. So at 43 attempts per game, if he's completing 20 to 25 at minimum, that means he's going to get close to around 300 yards, which is a safe floor, and a touchdown or two that's going to bring you right to 20 points or more, which is exactly what you need. He faces the Chiefs, that we discussed before, but the Chiefs have allowed 1 touchdown pass in each and every game this season. Now, they have been good of late, but I looked into that a little bit deeper, and their successes lately is a little bit misleading. These are the quarterbacks they faced in the past 6 or 7 weeks: Teddy Bridgewater, Michael Vick or Landry Jones, Matthew Stafford, and Peyton Manning, Brock Osweiler last week. So it's not like they've been facing guys like Rivers or Aaron Rodgers, and that's exactly what we're going to see this week in Rivers. So I think their success has been misleading lately, and Rivers' consistency speaks for itself. And at 8,200, I think it's a perfect fit for cash games. If you don't want to go with Rivers, another guy I like is Derek Carr for the Oakland Raiders at 7,700 against the Detroit Lions. Carr is one of the better matchups for any quarterback in Week 11. His price is escalated considering the fact that he was in the lowest 6,000s at the beginning of this year. But he has been good. He's had 19 or more FanDuel points in 6 of 9 games this season, each of his last 4 games. And he's in the top 5, I believe, in touchdown passes. So you're going to get decent production. And in a good matchup, I expect him to throw for close to 300 yards and a touchdown or 2 as well. So if you don't want to spend the extra $500 to get Rivers, Carr is a good option. He faces Detroit, who have allowed at least 16 fantasy points to every game in opposing quarterbacks this season. Now, what that means is that every single game they've given up at least probably 2 touchdowns. They've given up over 250 yards. And considering the fact that their floor is exactly what you need for Derek Carr to meet value, that's an excellent matchup for him, and it's an excellent matchup for your cash game lineups if you don't want to spend on Rivers. Moving on to running backs, the top guy I like this week, and I've liked him pretty much every week since he's become the starter, and that's simply because of his volume, and we'll discuss that in a bit. That's Devontae Freeman for the Atlanta Falcons. Freeman's very expensive, but he's actually $100 less than Todd Gurley, and that's interesting because a lot of people at this point are just at a plug-and-play with Gurley, and while I don't think that's a bad idea at all, for $100 less, I'm willing to take Freeman simply because he has added value in the passing department. Faces the Indianapolis Colts this week. Indianapolis has given up over 22 FanDuel points per game to opposing running backs this season. And when I look at Freeman, I look at consistency and I look at touches. And that's exactly what I want in a running back. And Freeman definitely has the combination of the two. He has at least 14 FanDuel points in every game that he started this season, so his floor is very high. And he has at least 19 touches in all these games as well. And what that means is he's going to get ample opportunity, whether it be on the ground or through the air, to meet value. And at 9,100, I think that's worth paying up for to get a guy that is probably set for at least 15 FanDuel points this week. The next guy is Charcandrick West for the Kansas City Chiefs at 7,100. West is my top overall running back and probably top overall player this week in terms of value because I think his matchup, his price, what he's done lately, what he's done as the starter, all combines to make for a top value. So I think I'm going to be playing him in all of my cash game lineups for sure. I'm going to have him in a lot of GPPs as well. In the last 3 games, West has 19.9, 20.2, and last week he went off for 29.6 FanDuel points. He's done so against the Broncos last week, the Lions, and the Steelers. As you've known, the Broncos and the Steelers have actually been very good against teams on the ground this season, so West's production has been that much more impressive. This week, he does not have a tough matchup at all, and that makes for an even better boost in his value as he faces the San Diego Chargers. Chargers have given up the most fantasy points to opposing running backs this season. They've given up over 27 FanDuel points per game on the ground. The Chargers have, and considering the fact that West is the feature in that offense now, Alex Smith still doesn't continue to throw the ball a ton, and when he does, it's to Jeremy Maclin. West has seen his value in the passing game rise as well. So considering the fact that he's the bell cow, Miles Davis is not a threat to take away that many touches. At 7,100 in the best matchup possible, West makes for a perfect play in cash game as a running back 1 or as a running back 2 if you are spending on Devontae Freeman. If you didn't want to spend on Freeman, it's going to give you a cheaper option like Latavius Murray to fill in as your second running back behind Charkandrick West. I like Murray this week because he has a decent matchup against the Detroit Lions. The Lions have given up over 23 FanDuel points per game to opposing running backs this season. And like West and Freeman, Murray is a guy that touches the ball the most on his offense. He has at least 16 touchdowns or 16 touches or more. Wish it was touchdowns, but 16 touches or more in each game this season. He's a very safe option with a high floor as he's caught a lot of passes out of the backfield. I believe he had 5 or 6 catches last week as well. So for a guy that gets a lot of touches and he does have a good matchup, he makes for an excellent running back 2 on FanDuel, depending on who you have as your first running back. Moving on to wide receivers, and there are 3 guys here that are more volume catchers, and I'm looking for consistency here. In cash games, I'm not looking for a guy to have 30 or 40 FanDuel points. If he does get that, that's great, but that's not the target. I like to look for guys that have a little bit of a safe floor, and they have decent upside based on catches and yards, but I'm not really looking for a guy that could have 2 or 3 touchdowns or could have 1 catch for 19 yards. That's exactly what we have in Eric Decker. What more can be said about this guy in cash games? I mean, you look at what he's done every season or all season long. He has 8 games played this season. His lowest output is 10.7 FanDuel points. He has a touchdown in all but 1 game. And in that game where he didn't score, he had 6 catches for 94 yards. So this guy has done it all. He's the top target in New York in terms of being the secondary option to Brandon Marshall. So if you're looking at Marshall to be covered by the top corner, which he has been every week, that'll explain Eric Decker's production, and you really can't argue with it, especially the consistency. He faces the Texans this week, who have allowed some huge games to opposing wide receivers this season. Miami, Jacksonville, and Indianapolis have all scored 30 or FanDuel points or more against Houston this season in terms of their wide receivers, and none of those guys have any huge options other than Allen Robinson for the Jaguars. So considering that Decker is definitely going to have a good matchup, he's been as consistent as they come, and his price is a little bit undervalued simply because he lines up with the production for guys that are priced around 76 to 7,800. So you're getting a little bit of a discount for a guy that's as consistent as they come, so be sure to consider him for your cash game lineups. The next guy is Danny Amendola, 6,100 against the Buffalo Bills. At this point, we've all heard about Julian Edelman's injury. He's going to be out for the rest of the regular season, at least with a broken foot. And that means Amendola is going to take that role in the offense, which has proven to be a very prominent role in terms of production. Now, last week we saw Amendola start to catch a lot of passes after the injury, and he ended up with 10 catches for 79 yards in Week 10. This week he faces the Bills, which you discussed earlier, who have 2 excellent cornerbacks on the outside. But they don't move to the inside, and the Bills have actually struggled a ton against slot receivers. Looking at some of the slot receivers earlier this season against the Bills, Julian Edelman had 11 catches for 92 yards and 2 touchdowns. Jarvis Landry in 2 games had a combined 19 catches for over 130 yards, no touchdowns, but those catches and yards are enough value itself. And, of course, Week 1, T.Y. Hilton torched the Bills for 7 catches for 88 yards. So premier slot receivers have succeeded a lot against the Bills. And although they have 2 good cornerbacks on the outside, they seem to get beaten a lot in the inside, and that's exactly what Amendola can do. And with Edelman out at just 6,100, he makes for a perfect play in cash games. He will be very highly owned, so if you wanted to stay away from him in tournaments, that may be an option, but I think he's safe to go with at just 6,100. The third guy is Stevie Johnson, who I hope he doesn't fall to the curse of the San Diego Chargers wide receivers, because they have just lost everyone. Keenan Allen's out. Malcolm Floyd's out. Stevie Johnson has now become the #1 receiver He won't be the #1 pass catcher, I don't think, because Antonio Gates is there. We'll get to him in a bit. But considering that just 5,600 against the Kansas City Chiefs, who have been really poor against wide receivers, the #1 option for a passing offense that throws the ball over 43 times is definitely a good play for me in cash games. Last week, he caught 7 of 10 targets for, or actually 2 weeks ago, they had a bye last week, 7 of 10 targets for 68 yards against the Bears. And I'm expecting those targets to rise a lot, especially with the fact that he's really the only receiver on that roster worth throwing to at this point, as Dontrell Inman has been a bit of a project so far in his career. Faces the Chiefs, as we discussed, but the Chiefs have given up over 37 FanDuel points per game to opposing wide receivers this season. And that's huge because the guy that's going to see most of the targets to wide receivers is going to get the bulk of that production. And even if he can get just half of that at 37 FanDuel points, you're looking at it between 18 and 19 FanDuel points, which is huge for 5,600. So I like Stevie Johnson as a #1 receiver in a pass-happy offense and a good matchup against the Chiefs. Moving on to tight end, first guy I wanted to talk about is Stevie Johnson's teammate, Antonio Gates. Now, Gates really does have a tough matchup this week. I can't stress that enough. The Kansas City Chiefs have been excellent against tight ends so far this season. But I think Gates' volume and the fact that he lines up pretty much anywhere makes him a safe option almost each and every week. Now, that was before Keenan Allen and Malcolm Floyd got hurt. Both of these guys out, I think Gates is going to see a huge amount of targets. He's going to see a ton of red zone targets, and it makes for a very good cash game play at 5,900. Gates has 28 catches for 312 yards and 2 touchdowns through 4 games this season, and most of them have come on an injured knee. The Chargers are coming off a bye week, which gives Gates a little bit of a time to rest. So I think this is going to make for an interesting option for him because a lot of people won't have him because of that tough matchup, but I think you got to be on him, especially with all the volume of targets he's expected to see, especially with all the rest of those pass catchers out. The next guy is Jordan Reed, who's in a similar boat as Gates this week, as he does have a tough matchup against the Panthers. But the volume of targets Reed has seen, it makes him a play each and every week in cash games, simply because he's the top option in the passing game with the Redskins. The Redskins do throw the ball very often. In 7 games this season, Reed has 9.3 FanDuel points in 8 of them. He has more than that, and I believe 7 of those games. So he has seen a ton of targets, and they've translated to points as he's caught 5 touchdowns in the last 3 weeks. Reed has averaged 2.7 less FanDuel points per game than Rob Gronkowski, who costs $2,500 more than him. And that's an interesting fact to look at because although that 2.7 points could be the difference, at 2,500, you're likely to find those points elsewhere. So if you don't want to go with Rob Gronkowski, who does have a good matchup pretty much each and every week because he's Rob Gronkowski, guys like Gates and Reed, especially at their targets, are good options for a bit of a price difference. They're going to get $2,500 to spend anywhere else, and I think that makes a big difference. So if you wanted to come down on tight end, these are 2 guys to look at. One other thing I wanted to note about tight ends is Jordan Reed has averaged 8.3 targets per game. And I think that's the same number as Rob Gronkowski. I'm almost certain that that's the exact number. So you're going to get the same 2 guys in terms of target. Of course, Rob Gronkowski is much more talented, but he's going to see the same amount of work. And for a tight end, if he catches the same amount of passes, chances are it's going to be the same amount of production. That's exactly what we're looking for. You're going to get a discount, $2,500 for similar production. I'm all in, especially for cash games. That pretty much concludes this week's cash game video on RotoCurve.com. Thanks for watching. Be sure to give us a thumbs up so we can continue to bring you analysis each and every week. And as always, go over to RotoCurve.com. There's free tools, free analysis, everything you see here along with data, tools. There's a ton of original things we have up over there for everybody for NFL. So be sure to give it a look. It's all free, so do take it to your advantage. Use this video to advantage, and hopefully let's make some money Week 11 cash games on FanDuel. Good luck, everyone.